This was an eventful weekend for the New York Islanders. Anthony Duclair went on LTIR. Lou Lamoriello made moves, but is there tension now between Patrick Roy and Lou Lamoriello? We'll talk about that and a busy weekend of Islanders hockey. All that coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. We have got a busy show today, lots of important things to talk about. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, a topic maybe that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis. And it's always great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. What a weekend it was, and I really need to sort of take a step back. Yeah, there were two games played Friday and Saturday. Islanders split them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on today's show, the details of the games. But the biggest events that took place over the weekend include the decision to place Anthony Duclair on LTIR, and then the moves that Lou Lamoriello made after that, and the reaction to those moves by head coach Patrick Roy. And I think the big question that everybody's asking right now around the New York Islanders is there tension between Patrick Roy and Lou Lamoriello as far as the way this team is presently put together and the direction that this team is heading in? So we're going to talk about all of that. First, let's start with the moves that were made. As mentioned, Anthony Duclair moved to LTIR. That frees up some cap space. And after that move, what does Lou Lamoriello do? He takes Liam Foudy and loans him back to Bridgeport. Foudy no longer with the big club, back in the AHL. Then he recalls Hudson Fasching and Pierre Engvall, and then Matt Martin ends up signing a one-year deal for the league minimum, so he's no longer on a PTO. So essentially, what Lou Lamoriello did at this point was he took Liam Foudy and sent him back to the minors. Foudy had a great training camp, adds a little speed, possibly adds a little offensive juice if he can find his consistency. And as we mentioned, everydayers may recall, the fourth line that Patrick Roy had put together was more of a speed line. So Foudy gone. Then you bring back Hudson Fasching, who had a good rookie year, a good first year with the Islanders 2 years ago, kind of struggled last year, and was injured for most of training camp. But look, Hudson Fasching is a fourth line kind of a guy. not going to give you a whole lot of offense. Then you add Pierre Engvall, who I think, most Islander fans were pleased that Engvall had been sent down to the minors. Not all, but I think most, because Engvall has not been as consistent as we would like him to see. And the things that he doesn't do in his game don't always make up for the things that he does do well. So, and then you add Martin. And Matt Martin, the good news is you add Matt Martin, that does increase the physicality of this team, and we know they needed a little more grit. But again, what you essentially did was you put one new player that this team signed on LTIR. That was the right move. And then you brought back 3 guys who were with the team last year but didn't necessarily do great things. And all of a sudden, this struggling Islanders team ends up being a lot more like last year's team, only all the players on the roster are a year older. And look, I have mixed feelings about these moves. I always liked Hudson Fasching. I would like to see him on the big roster, but again, at best, I think he's either a 12th or 13th forward. He's going to be one of those guys who's not going to be in the lineup every day. Matt Martin, same thing, and Lou Lamoriello alluded to this when he announced the signing, that, Matt Martin may not play every day. And I totally get that. And everydayers, you'll recall I said, if they do re-sign Matt Martin, he's going to take over, sort of that similar enforcer role where, he may only be playing every second or third or fourth day, like Ross Johnston, who ended up playing, 28 games for the Islanders in his last season here. I mean, I love Matt Martin, the person. I love what he's meant to this team, but I'm not sure he's the best option going forward at this time. And then, Pierre Engvall, is he the most talented guy with NHL experience down in Bridgeport who they could have called up? Yeah, he probably was. But has he gotten you the results? He's not talented enough to fit into the top 6, and he's not physical enough or consistent enough with his effort to be in the lineup in the bottom 6 every game. And, clearly there are some things going on here that are not necessarily ideal between Lou Lamoriello's decisions and the way Patrick Waugh wants this team to be put together. And Waugh didn't say anything specific. He didn't come out and say, you know what, I don't like these moves. But there were some strange goings on here. And the first aspect of it that was a little strange is that before the game, Lou Lamoriello explained all the roster moves. Patrick Waugh, the coach, was not made available for the media to talk to before the game. That's a violation of NHL rules. And then none of the players were made available either. So all of a sudden, you've got a situation where the team is violating rules. Fines are very likely going to come out of that. The media is frustrated. Let's face it, the media is the eyes and ears of the fan. So not speaking to the media is basically, saying some terrible things about, not talking to the media is hiding things from the fan base, more or less. And so you get to this place where, everything seems to be a little bit out of whack. And then to top it all off, you get some comments from Patrick Waugh after the game that lead us to believe that there are very well could be some tension right now between Lou and Roy. And we're going to talk about those comments by Patrick Roy, what we're seeing, and try to sort of fill in the blanks. Now, again, we do not know that there is definitely tension, but the statements that Roy made after the game definitely lead us to believe that there is a difference of opinion between the general manager and the head coach as far as what direction they want this team's roster to go in and who should be on that roster. So we're going to talk a lot more about that. We'll break down the two games from the weekend, and we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day. For the birthday of the day, a player the Islanders acquired midway through the 1974-75 season who gave a young Islanders team valuable experience and clutch performances in their first ever playoff run. Let's see if you can guess who this player is. We've got that and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks basically puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as little as 15 minutes. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Basically, right now, if you sign up, you get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, code LOCKEDONNHL, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So here's what Patrick Roy had to say after the game when he was asked about the moves that Lou Lamoriello made over the weekend. Here's what he said when he was asked about Pierre Engvall. We know what he did for this team the past 2 years, and I guess Lou thought it was a good moment for him to be back and play. That does not sound like a ringing endorsement of bringing back Pierre Engvall. And, I don't think Engvall fits in very well with what Patrick Roy is trying to do. And I think the issue for Roy with Engvall has been more than anything a lack of what Roy perceived as a lack of consistent effort, a lack of stick-to-itness, a lack of desire. The inconsistency certainly bothered Patrick Roy, and I just don't think Roy wanted him back at this point, that he would have preferred Liam Foudy, possibly. We'll see whether or not this works out. And then here's what Patrick Roy said about Matt Martin. And here's the thing. Having Matty back in the lineup, he brings leadership experience and that physicality that we feel and Lou thinks is important for us. Again, it does not sound like he agreed with these moves. And now, Patrick Roy may very well be putting a lineup out there that doesn't fit what he wants to do. And I've always made the comparison, and everydayers, you'll remember this. I've made the comparison that a head coach is like a chef, and a general manager is the guy buying the ingredients for the chef. And right now, it seems like Patrick Roy has to cook meals with ingredients that that are not his first choice. And it's not that his first choice is unavailable, but it's not the direction that the guy buying the ingredients wants to go in. And again, this could end up blowing over and being no big deal. Or it could theoretically be that people are reading too much into the statements made by Patrick Roy. But the statements that Roy made clearly do not sound like he agrees with the decisions made by Lou Lamoriello, and the fact that he was not available before the game only reinforces, in violation of league rules, only further reinforces the belief that this is not the way that Patrick Roy wanted to go. And again, it could end up being no big deal. But at the same time, you got to watch going forward whether or not there is any additional tension between ownership or between the general manager and the coach, because you just want, this is a tough situation. The Islanders came into this season handicapped by the bad cap management of Lou Lamoriello. They already at the beginning of the season couldn't put a full 23-man roster together because of the poor cap management of Lou Lamoriello. And they didn't really, this team, even with a healthy Anthony Duclair and a productive Maxim Siplikov, still needed more offensive juice and to improve their scoring depth and, improve this team. And they just couldn't do it because of the fact that the cap space has not been well adjusted and utilized. And the fact that Lou Lamoriello refuses to trade away any guys that he knows and likes that would free up that cap space. And then, it's already a kind of a difficult situation. And then, 8 games roughly into the season, to have all of this happen where, changes are made that are not to the liking of the coach, that does not bode well for the direction of this team. And it's something we need to keep an eye on if you are the New York Islanders and their fans. The other thing is, despite the fact that they announced an attendance of over 15,000 at the game Saturday night against Florida, let's face it, 15,000 announced. Maybe they sold that many tickets, but there were a heck of a lot of empty seats, both visible on television and, fans who were at the game who took panoramic shots of the crowd to illustrate this. Clearly, that has been an issue, and fans, whether it's because of the parking situation, the prices of the tickets, the prices of food, the product on the ice, which is not necessarily to their liking, fans seem to be voicing their displeasure early. And look, this is a Saturday night home game against the defending Stanley Cup champions. There is no reason that building should not be full if the fans are even moderately investing in this team. That is another thing that we have to keep an eye on with the New York Islanders. Fans booed the Islanders at different times on Saturday, and we'll get to that when we break down both games. Understandably so, based on the way the Saturday game unfolded. And I just clearly can see the discontent that the fans seem to be expressing. And it's awfully early in the season for that to be happening. It's, again, not what you want to see. And we're still in Brocktober, so these are things that have to be looked at, and hopefully this team can turn things around, but they've got to be better. All right, we're going to get to both games from the past weekend. A win Friday in New Jersey, a disappointing loss Saturday at home against Florida. We'll break it all down, plus our Islanders' birthday of the day, all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And Islander fans, check out the latest odds for the Islanders as they host the Anaheim Ducks Tuesday. Go to FanDuel.com and check it out. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. You can find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Friday night, Islanders, Devils in New Jersey, and the Islanders ended up with a 4-3 overtime win thanks to a really pretty goal by Bo Horvat on the give and go with Matthew Barzal. But again, this was one of those games that was just disappointing from the standpoint that the Devils ended up stealing a point from the Islanders when the Islanders had leads of 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, and ended up giving up the tying goal by Jesper Bratt with 1:29 left, and the Devils had pulled their goalie in order to get the 6-on-5 advantage. So Jake Allen was out of his net. Do the Islanders even know how to play 5-on-6? Do they practice it? It does not look like they do. And overall, you have got to be able to hold these leads. Losing 3 one-goal leads, including a lead with 1.5 minutes left in regulation. Again, at least the Islanders got the win in OT. That was huge, but to have the Devils steal that point when the Devils could very well be one of the teams battling the Islanders for one of those final playoff spots, it just isn't a particularly good look for the Islanders. Ilya Sorokin, 32 saves. He looked really solid. The Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, Maxim Siplikov line looked great. Nelson and Palmieri both with a goal and an assist. And some great open ice hits by Alexander Romanov in this game, although Romanov suffered an upper body injury and did not dress on Saturday night when the Islanders took on the Florida Panthers. So we sort of have to keep an eye on that situation. And then you had line changes once everything went down on Saturday with the changes in the roster. So Simon Holmstrom still up on the top line, not really showing much with Horvat and Barzal. The second line remained intact, Nelson, Siplikov, and Palmieri. Then you had J.G. Pajot, Anders Lee, and Casey Cizikas on the third line. Kyle McLean, Matt Martin, and Pierre Engvall on the fourth line. And Saturday night, the Islanders get off in the first 11:41 of the game to a 3-0 lead. And again, Nelson and Palmieri both scored. Dennis Cholowski getting his first goal with the Islanders this year in his first game with the Islanders this year because he came on in place of Romanov. But Islanders are up 3-0 and then give up 6 unanswered goals to the Florida Panthers. And again, the Panthers just absolutely took over the game after the Islanders went up 3-0. They gave up a power play goal again. There was technically a shorthanded goal allowed by the Islanders, but it was into the empty net. But just a sloppy overall performance where the Islanders clearly took their foot off the gas. Again, that bottom six, not really getting a lot of productivity. No shots on goal again for Simon Holmstrom. No shots on goal for Matthew Barzal. Just the goaltending, Semyon Varlamov had what I would describe as his shakiest game of the year. While Sorokin played very well on Friday. And just the Islanders not doing the little things they need to do to win hockey games. And just watching this early lead evaporate the way it did, very, very frustrating. The top line, -2 in this game. That didn't help. And just they took their foot off the gas, collapsed. The fans got on the team, and rightfully so. They couldn't clear their own zone. Their power play looked completely disjointed. And, Wahlstrom, Fasching, and Romanov were the scratches, but it really did not end up working out, and a collapse. And, here's the thing now. We are, into this season, and, the Islanders have a 3-3-2 record. So they played 8 games, and they have already lost so many leads. Blue leads against Utah, blue leads against Montreal, blue leads against the Devils, blew a 3-0, 3-1, 3-2 lead against Florida. Unfortunately, the problem is this. Lou Lamoriello, and after the weekend moves, he brings back more of the roster you had from last year, and then you wonder why the team is having the same problems that they had last year with mostly the same players. And it shouldn't be that big of a mystery. We're going to talk more about it in the coming days, no doubt about that. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and today is the 76th birthday of former Islanders center Jude Drouin, the Murdochville, Quebec native, 5'10", 160 pounds, a third-round pick of the Montreal Canadiens back in 1966, made his NHL debut with the Habs in 68-69, joined the Minnesota North Stars in 70-71, and got traded in February of 1975 from the North Stars to the Islanders, and boy, did he finish strong. 14 goals and 32 points in 40 games for the Isles that year, and then in the playoffs, 6 goals, 18 points in 17 games as the Islanders made that miraculous playoff run in their first ever playoff appearance, and boy, Jude Drouin was a huge part of that. Then had back-to-back 20-goal seasons for the Isles, slowed down a bit in 77-78, and then finished his career with the Winnipeg Jets in parts of 2 seasons. For his NHL career, 666 games, 151 goals, 456 points, 346 penalty minutes, add 27 goals, 68 points in 72 playoff games. And most of those, but not all, were with the Islanders. His best game as an Islander, how about January 6th, 1976, Islanders hosting the Kansas City Scouts, now the New Jersey Devils, at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. And with the Islanders up by a score of 3-1 late in the second period, Jude Drouin, our Islanders' birthday of the day, scores his 13th goal of the year. Ed Westfall and JP Parise with the assists. That made it 4-1 Islanders. Another power play goal by Drouin early in the third. Dennis Potvin and Ed Westfall with the helpers. And then a third power play goal to complete the hat trick late in the third period. It's Drouin from JP Parise and Ed Westfall. Islanders with Billy Smith in goal. He had 21 saves, beating up on Bill McKenzie, the Kansas City Scouts goalie. They crushed the Scouts by a final score of 8-1. Jude Drouin, 3 goals. He had the hat trick, 6 shots on goal in this game. Meanwhile, 2 goals and 2 assists for defenseman Jerry Hart, and 3 helpers for the captain, Ed Westfall. But for Jude Drouin, a big hat trick for him, and he, a key component to the Islanders' turnaround in the mid-70s. He's our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk more about the roster situation and talk a little bit more about getting the top line going. We'll also preview Tuesday's home game against Anaheim, so make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.